Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Ron Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are going to be concluding What If Issei Was the Ghostwriter, Highschool DxD, Flame of Fury, Season 3, Part 3, the Season 3 finale. Before we get into today's video, as always, if you're a fan of the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcasting that's to come out now and in the future. Now, this video was actually supposed to come out 2 days ago, but as you know, if you read the community posts, I had a family emergency that day, and I was really feeling under the weather these last few days, and I'm supposed to be going on break next week for crying out loud. But these past 2 days, I have just not felt good at all. I felt terrible. I wouldn't say it's sickness per se, but it was just one of those feelings of exhaustion, a type of sickness where it's like, if I had tried to record, and I tried to record both of those days, I did, but each time it just was not coming out good, and I did not want to put out that type of content. Today, I did feel a lot better, so I was able to record and get this video out. As for Season 4 and what I'm going to do with that, I'm actually going to be working on the recordings while this video is going to be coming out now. And basically, next week, while I'm off, I'm basically just going to have videos made so that you guys can have something to listen to while I'm off. So next week you are going to be getting content. The only thing though is that while you're getting content next week, I'm not actually going to be making it that week. I'm actually going to be making it this weekend. So like Saturday and maybe a little bit on Sunday, I'm just going to be making the videos then. And they're just going to be uploaded on a schedule each and every day. So for next week, you're going to get Season 4 Parts 1 and 2 on Monday and Tuesday. There won't be an upload on Wednesday. The Season 4 finale will be on Thursday. And I have a special video that I'm making, and that'll be out on Friday. So you'll get 4 videos next week. So Monday, Tuesday, no video on Wednesday, and then you'll get a video on Thursday and Friday. But that's all going to be pre-recorded because next week I'm going to be, taking a break. I might even take a few extra days, just because I've been on this grind ever since the end of January, basically. So from the end of January to basically April, I've just been making videos nonstop. So I think that now I'm going to take, some time off to recharge and get ready as we get into the spring and the summertime, and I have a lot of stuff planned for that. So that's just everything I want you guys to know. But thank you all for supporting the channel. Cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow, as we are on the road to 2K and beyond. But anyway, without further ado, we're going to get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As the Underworld found itself under attack, both Issei and Danny would be in awe and in fear of who they were standing up against. Blackheart had gotten a hold of the Necronomicon Deus Mortis, the Book of the Dead. On top of that, he also had the power of the infinite dragon, Ophis, sealed away and under his control. Under normal circumstances, to use the Necronomicon would be to damn one's own soul. It was a power that could corrupt absolutely. However, Blackheart was a special case. For you see, Blackheart was a being that had no soul, no heart. He felt no remorse, no regret, no fear over any of his actions. As such, how could you corrupt something that did not exist? How could you bring to ruin something that was never there? You could say that he was the ultimate walking cheat code for the power. For it to have fallen into his hands, it would be absolutely devastating. And what was worse was that he knew how to play psychological warfare. Not just bringing back any in his undead army, but bringing back one of the former Ghost Riders, his father, Johnny Blaze. Danny Ketch in that moment began to feel his own festering hatred boil. For so long, he had tried to keep all of his feelings tied inside. Johnny was like a father figure to him, the man that trained him in the ways of the Ghost Rider. All the same, now to have to fight against his former mentor, it was taking its emotional toll upon him. However, these emotions of anger, of hatred, and regret, they only fueled him and made him stronger. So much so that even Blackheart was impressed at that moment. As both Issei and Danny would power up to face against the former Ghost Rider, Lady Mephisto had her own problems to deal with, as she was confronted by none other than her sister Lilith. The two women were once considered the most powerful of the Underworld. However, Lilith was someone who was always keen to abuse her power, and as such she was banished a long time ago. But to think that she would have made her return now of all times, and more so to have aligned herself with Blackheart of all people. However, for Lilith it was a no-brainer to do so. Her nephew offered her something she couldn't refuse. A chance to destroy her sister once and for all and take her rightful place in her own section of the Underworld. When it came between the two of them, it was always a rivalry when it came to power and beauty. Something that Lilith always felt as though she were lacking compared to Lady Mephisto. Although now, with the power of Ophis, the power of the infinite dragon having been channeled into her, she felt as though now she finally had the chance to stand against her rival. In the meantime, everyone else was trying their best to help wherever they could. Xerxes and Odin were battling against Loki, as well as against the Titan Killer, a weapon that had not been used since the last Great War. Even for a being like Xerxes and Odin, the Titan Killer was not a being to be mocked. A giant golem in size, a powerful artifact. The monstrosity was capable of slaying gods in and of itself. Not just Issei though, but others were also getting involved in the conflict. Vali, Biko, Arthur, and Kuroka, the Four Horsemen, alongside with Syraor and Irina, made their way to the battlefield as quickly as possible. They fought against those of the renegade class, as well as the army of the undead that was starting to reform. Under normal circumstances, the souls were usually sealed away. However, the fact that Blackheart had gotten his hand on the Necronomicon Deus Mortis proved to not be the case in this matter. As they continued to fight through, Irina was worried for Issei and his safety. As much as she wanted to go towards him and help him, she was called by Sir Michael as he requested her assistance in his own battle. She knew she could not deny the request, and she would go to his side at once, although she promised that she would get to Issei as soon as possible. As for Rias and Sona and their households, they were caught in the worst of circumstances, being attacked right after a raiding game, when both sides were extremely tired and exhausted. This was definitely to their disadvantage. as Deodora Astaroth revealed his treacherous nature, attacking them and pinning them down, while also kidnapping Issei in the process. Now Issei was in danger. Everyone now starting to feel the gravity of the situation. Rainier especially. She felt as though she had finally started to come around. She had now begun to make friends with Issei and everyone else. Issei, the girl of whom she betrayed and had killed, had actually forgiven her and become her friend. Now that she had been taken away, Rainier, along with everyone else, wanted to save her as soon as possible. Issei wanting to do so also. However, his hands were full at the moment, as both he and Danny were fighting against Johnny. Issei tried to speak reason to him, but Danny revealed there would be no point. The man standing in front of them was not the Johnny Blaze that he once knew. This was merely a shell, a vessel. Whatever was inside of him, that being was no longer Johnny. Just a wannabe soul in Johnny's body, using his power. An immense amount of power, to say the least. As they continued fighting now, Issei would get word from the others of what was happening. Learning of Issei's kidnapping, he wanted to go and help her as soon as possible. However, he didn't want to leave Danny to fight alone. However, Danny would tell him to go and help the others at once. That right now, their main focus was getting back the book and defeating Blackheart. Issei was a bit unsure in that moment. He didn't know if he had the power, if he was strong enough to face him. However, Danny would turn back towards him, stating that if anyone was strong enough, it would be him. They had faith and they believed that he could do it. He just had to believe in himself. As for Johnny, Danny would tell Issei to leave that to him. Issei would summon his car into the Underworld at once before hopping inside and blazing straight through the battlefield towards where Rias and the others were fighting, going to help them as fast as possible. While Danny continued his battle against Johnny, the would-be demon inside of his body remarking that the power was exhilarating, although for some reason he couldn't use it to its fullest extent. And this was where Danny would reveal the difference between the two, showing that he had the power of a ghostwriter who put in the work and was always at the ready, whereas the demon inside of Johnny's body, that was nothing more but a vessel, second-hand. He didn't know what it truly meant to be a ghostwriter, what it truly meant to hold the title of the Spirit of Vengeance. All of that power, he didn't know how to use it. And Danny would then reveal the difference between the two. In the meanwhile, Issei would blaze through the fighting, his car speeding by, running over many a demon. Issei using his one free hand to hold his shotgun outside of the car door, as he would blast away at his foes in front of him, using his Hellfire shotgun. He eventually would arrive to where the arena was for the raiding game. There he would see the forces of Deodora Astaroth continuing to pin down Rias and Sona's team. He would quickly exit out of the vehicle, having the car move telepathically to shield the others from the attack, while he would take the forefront of the fight, blasting and destroying them all. Once he was able to send the forces packing, he would turn back to Rias and everyone else to check on them. Thankfully, he had some Phoenix Tears, enough to heal them all. Once everyone was up and at full speed, they would turn their attention to where Deodora was held up. As the two combined groups now joined forces, leading the charge, there was no point in playing any games. Deodora spoke to them, telling them that he wanted them to fight through his minions, to make this a bit of a game in and of itself. However, Issei was not in the mood. As he held up his hand, he blasted all of them away. Walking past them all, going down the corridors, they were eventually stopped by one familiar foe, that being Freed Selzen. However, Freed was much different this time than he was before. For you see, Freed had taken to eating a few devils. Absorbing some of their powers, he turned into a monstrous form of himself. And what was worse, he revealed the true intent of Deodora Astaroth, of why he wanted Assia Argento, his true motivation. You see, Deodora was the one that Assia healed all that time ago. And it was not by accident. He had her heal him with the expressed intent of getting her caught and having her removed from the church. He planned to swoop in during her time of despair. But before he could though, Issei and then Rainier got in the way of his plans. But Deodora always had a special interest in Assia. For you see, Deodora wanted nothing more but to build Assia up, to make her feel the highest of highs, then absolutely break her, to crush her spirits. That was what he got off on. His personal fetish. To take a girl that was innocent and pure, to build her up with happiness, only to take it away, to watch it crumble in front of her, it was what he lived for. Hearing this would put everyone in a state of disgust. But for Issei, his anger only continued to rise. As he walked in front of Freed, without even transforming, he grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the ground repeatedly, bashing his skull against the concrete floor over and over again, until blood started to pour again and again and again. Issei would use the Reaper technique, as black skeletal arms protruded from the ground surrounding Freed, digging into his skin as it pulled him under. He could feel the flesh tearing from his bone. He could feel himself being burnt as he was pulled under the ground itself. He felt as though he were being swallowed by magma. Freed was in immense pain as he looked up towards Issei. Issei looking down upon him with a face that filled him with pure dread and terror. His penitent stare, shining straight through towards Freed. Issei was using the stare to its absolute max, to the point where even Freed Selzen began to feel some amount of fear. He began to apologize, to desperately beg for his life. However, when he realized that that was not going to change the outcome, he cursed Issei. He cursed them all to his grave as he was swallowed up. They proceeded forward until eventually arriving into the Grand Hall, where Deodora sat on his throne next to Assia, who was chained up through a special seal. Deodora continued to mock Issei, remarking that he had gained more than enough power to make short work of the Ghost Rider. He would continue to make crude remarks towards Assia, Issei only slowly walking towards him. The others took a step back, for they knew what was about to happen. It was not going to be pretty. As Assia awoke to see Issei there, her heart was filled with joy. Seeing this, Deodora remarked that maybe the best way to break her was to kill her precious Issei right in front of her. Although he hoped that they hadn't done the deed yet, he didn't want the Ghost Rider's sloppy seconds. In that comment, would be the last comment that Deodora Astaroth ever made. As Issei told Asya to close her eyes, she did as instructed, and he apologized for what she was about to hear. What happened next was something that cannot easily be described, for no words could do justice for just how graphic the end of Deodora Astaroth was. He was always going to die here today, that much was certain. However, it was the way that Issei disposed of him that was truly horrifying. It was so bad that Rias had to use a special form of magic, blocking out the sound from all of their ears, including Asya. Issei was grateful for this since he didn't want her or anyone to be subjugated to the sounds of Deodora. Blood-curdling sounds, screams of pain and of agony. They were beyond what anyone was expecting at that moment. These were screams of those that would be heard in the lowest depths of hell. The death that Deodora experienced was one that you would not wish upon your worst enemy, and yet it was something that he wholeheartedly deserved. When everyone awoken and they opened their eyes, there was nothing of him left, only ash where he once remained. As they all looked around to see where had gone, Issei turning to them and telling them that the fight was over and there was nothing else for them to worry about. He then turned his attention towards where Asya was, pulling her free from her restraints and helping her out. They were all grateful that Asya was okay. As they made their way back outside, Issei would get in contact with everyone else, asking if they were okay. Vali would tell them that he and the 4 horsemen were with Azazel right now. They believed they had found a way to potentially free Ophis, using Arthur's holy sword, Coldrum. They could go to the dimensional gap where Ophis was being captive. If they could pull her out, that would sever the power, and thus it would greatly decrease the strength of Blackheart's forces. Irina was still continuing aiding Lord Michael, as well as Odin and Rosvisa, as they were fending off against an infinitely more powered Loki. They knew that in order for them to truly turn the tide, they needed Ophis to be free. While Vali and his team were going to go and free Ophis, off in the distance, in an open clearing where debris and rubble remained, Issei could see clear as day Blackheart, standing there and waiting for him, with a smile. Issei told everyone what was happening, stating that he could buy them time with Blackheart, at least enough time for them to go and save Ophis. Vali and Irina would be against this at once. They agreed they would fight Blackheart together, and Issei knew this. But right now, Blackheart was the most dangerous being in the Underworld right now. If he could just hold his attention long enough, that would give them a fighting chance. Irina would tell Issei to make sure that he didn't die. Issei would promise not to. And Vali, making him promise to save some for him, since he wanted a shot at Blackheart as well. And Issei making that promise also. As he turned to everyone else in that moment, he told them to stay where they were and to not get involved. Rias was the most outspoken against this idea, Rainier close behind her, Akano, Konako, and everyone else, Kiba, Sona, everybody. They wanted to fight with Issei. They didn't want him to carry this burden all on his own. However, Issei would turn back towards them, telling them that it was going to be alright. They should try to save up their strength as much as possible. As he gave them one last smile, he turned back and walked towards Blackheart. The moment he was far enough away, a barrier would form around him. It was large enough, covering a wide area. However, Rias and the others were left out and they could not get inside. All they could do was watch as both Issei and Blackheart got closer and closer, until eventually the two of them were standing in front of one another. Issei Hyodo. Blackheart. I do hope you'll be entertaining, like last time. It was really fun. Although I must admit, I do get rather bored. You know, when I see a new toy, I have to push it to its limits. And while, you know, a lot of my toys, well, they always break. Is that so? I have a thing for breaking toys myself. Really? You really are going to be fun then. Well, why don't we do a little breaking? I made this barrier especially for us. You see, it's tied to our lifespans. The barrier will only go down when one of us dies. Is that a fact? Indeed. You know what this means, right? There won't be a second chance for you or I here today. So I do hope you give me everything you've got. Because only one of us is going to be walking out of here alive. I wouldn't have it any other way. As Issei and Blackheart let their powers begin to flare, everyone could only look on and watch as the clash between the spirit of vengeance and the soulless demon got underway. Both Issei and Blackheart would transform into their true forms. For Blackheart, he started to rise in stature, growing in mass as his body became completely black, standing on his hind legs, his hands becoming that of claws, as dark spikes protruded from his head all the way down to his back, his eyes glowing a bright red as a long tail also emerged. He looked like something of pure horror. And as for Issei, he transformed into his Ghost Rider state. Blackheart could feel the power from Issei. He had become much stronger than he was before, although it wasn't quite like last time. All the same, there was no turning back now. This was a fight to the death, and both he and Issei would engage in combat. As the two of them fought close range, Blackheart would slash and claw away at Issei's chest. Issei using his gun, he would focus his energies, blasting away at Blackheart over and over again, doing some decent damage. Pulling out his dagger, he would stab it into Blackheart's neck, causing the being to scream out in pain as he grabbed Issei by the throat and threw him to the ground. The two of them wrestling and fighting with one another, blasting each other with hellfire, Issei's bright red and Blackheart's dark blue. The two creatures of the night doing battle in the Underworld. Both of them knowing that this fight wouldn't end until one of them fell to their death. One could say that this was truly poetic, and that no Ghost Rider could fight in a much more fitting end. Either he would gain his vengeance, or die trying. As Rias and the others watched on, they felt as though Issei might actually have a fighting chance. It wasn't like before where he was being thrashed around. No, Issei was holding his own. It actually made them a bit hopeful. However, Sona would look on with a much more serious and somber tone. She could already see that the fight was not in Issei's favor. Granted, he had become much more powerful since the last time he fought against Blackheart. To compare the two, Issei was doing much better on his own this time around, but this was not enough. Deep down, everyone knew Blackheart wasn't using his full power, and Issei was giving this everything he had. Sure, his blows were connecting, but there was still something lacking. He hadn't learned how to tap into his crimson form yet. That form was the one thing that they knew gave Blackheart a serious problem. As Issei fought with Blackheart, elsewhere in the Underworld, the fights were still reaching their culminating ends. Surzex and Azazel would fight against Shelba Beelzebub, along with Loki and the other members of the Chaos Brigade, as well as the rogue Devil forces, along with that of the ancient weapons from the last Great War. While they were doing so, Volley would be leading his own team through the dimensional gap. With the power of Arthur's holy sword, they were capable of traversing through the void without worry of being swallowed by it and losing their very existence. It would take some time, but eventually they would find Ophis. In her appearance, she was that of a young girl. She was chained and restrained in through the void itself. Once they reached her restraints, they would see that the seal was extremely powerful. Here was where Volley knew he would have to use his powers to the fullest extent. He channeled his juggernaut drive before turning into the large white dragon itself. Once he had done so, the dragon would grab hold of the chains using his divine dividing the power of the seal itself over and over again, absorbing as much of it as he could and dispelling it, hoping that he could make the chains weak enough so that they could be broken and that Ophis could be freed. Both Biko and Kuroka would use their chi to siphon away the power, while Arthur would continue to hold firm with his sword, creating a space within the dimensional gap, protecting everyone. There was no perception of time within the void, causing everyone to work with earnest. There was no telling how long they might be in there. Eventually, though, the chains would be weakened enough, and with one great strike of his sword, Arthur would be able to cut through all of the chains. Ophis was free and would fall, only to be caught by Biko as Volley transformed back into his regular state. Although using that much power, it took a toll on him. That seal was not something that could have been easily broken. In fact, it was only because of divine dividing that he actually stood a chance at freeing Ophis in the first place, as there wasn't going to be any other way otherwise. With Ophis now free, they were going to make their way back to the Underworld. Once they did so, they contacted with Azazel, telling him that Ophis had been freed and that the power of infinity was severed. This would take effect in the battle itself, as the powers of the Chaos Brigade would begin to wane, losing their strength. It allowed Sir Zex, and along with the others, to gain the upper hand. Loki became fearful, as now his one primary source of power that gave him the edge in fighting against Odin was now taken from him. And Odin, using the power of the Odin Force itself, would defeat Loki and seal him away, with help from Rosvisa and Irina, the Red Dragon Empress. With the battle now won on their end, it seemed as though the Chaos Brigade had no choice but to retreat. Nightmare quickly taking his leave, leaving Loki to his fate, before appearing where Lilith was, as she was now losing ground against her sister Lady Mephisto. He arrived and explained that there was a change of plans, and that they were going to have to leave. He grabbed Lilith and disappeared into shadow itself, the two demons disappearing before Lady Mephisto had a chance to finish them off. Once that was over, she would go over to where Danny Ketch was, as he was wrapping up his fight against the fake Johnny Blaze. No longer having the power of the infinite dragon, the fake Johnny would be destroyed. As Danny powered down, taking a moment to catch his breath, using way more power than he ever thought he'd ever need to, Lady Mephisto would take to healing him and restoring his stamina. With the Chaos Brigade now retreating, Irina would rush off towards where Issei was immediately, flying at top speeds, her angel wings carrying her as she was flying with the power of the Red Dragon Emperor. It wouldn't take her long to arrive to where everyone else was. Seeing them outside of the barrier, she would ask what they were doing. Why weren't they helping Issei? He needed them. However, they would explain that Blackheart had set up a barrier that wouldn't go down unless one of them died. Upon hearing this, Irina would use her boosted gear, boosting it to the absolute limit. She thought that if she could at least transfer the power somehow to Issei, then maybe that would give him a fighting chance. However, due to the barrier, the transfer would be incomplete. With no other choice, she would transfer the power to everyone else. With no uncertain terms, Irina wanted to break through the barrier to help Issei as soon as possible. Both Blackheart and Issei in the meanwhile would continue their duel. Issei could feel he was at the end of his ropes. As for Blackheart, he could tell that the power of Ophis had been taken away. But all the same though, despite losing the power of the infinite dragon, there were other things that were more important. Even if they had lost the power of Ophis, they had done what they had set out to do. This battle had taken more of a toll on the forces of the three great powers than they originally thought. Their numbers were already dwindling after the last great battle. That was the reason why devils, angels, and fallen angels had to be made artificially in the first place. And even then, their numbers weren't what they used to be. This battle alone set back so much progress. Just when it seemed as though their respective communities were starting to flourish, like a garden that was once again blooming after a drought, Blackheart was the fire that scorched that garden, destroying all the progress that had been made. Even if they had won this battle, in the long term, this had taken them a step back in winning the war, and Blackheart knew this best, as both he and Issei were fighting tooth and nail until the end. As Issei channeled more and more upon the power of the Ghost Rider. Even without the power of Ophis, Blackheart still held the edge. Issei, feeling as though he wasn't going to gain the victory. No matter how much Issei pulled upon his power, in the end it just wasn't enough. Until eventually Blackheart became disappointed. "What's the matter, Issei? I thought you were going to give me a better challenge than this. And here I was having so much high expectations out of you. For a brief moment, I thought you could give me what I wanted. What I've wanted for so long." "And just what the hell is that?" "It doesn't really matter. You can't give me what I'm looking for. In the end, you're no better than he was. You're a disappointment. A failure. You're pathetic." Blackheart would take his foot as he stomped Issei into the ground, over and over again. The flame around Issei's skull starting to dim more and more, as Irina and the others desperately tried to break through the barrier. Irina's power began to rise again and again, the boosted gear doubling at an even faster rate. Irina had been through this pain once before. She had felt the loss of losing Issei once. That was a loss she did not want to suffer again. Rainier channeled her fallen angel power, creating multiple constructs of light, blasting at the barrier, trying her best to do damage. Both Akeno and Rias fighting with everything they had. Everyone was giving it their all to break through the barrier as quickly as they could. Seeing Issei being beaten down, they knew this wasn't a game. The barrier wasn't going to be undone until one of them died, and they had to get in there before that happened. However, as their powers began to rise, Blackheart would turn his attention towards Irina. He could feel her power starting to grow. The angel girl desperately fighting to get to Issei. And it was then that he had his idea. Issei had been beaten to the point where now he de-transformed, turning back into his regular human form. Blackheart picked him up, holding him by his head as he pointed him towards the others. Irina desperately fighting through, yelling for Issei to hold on, to hang on just a little longer. Blackheart would look towards them, his eyes fixated on Irina. "It seems my judgment was misplaced. Maybe I was really looking for you, Red Dragon Empress. I do pray that this will give me my desired outcome. I hope that this is enough of a sacrifice." As Issei made eye contact with Irina, as he saw the tears streaming down her face, he would simply tell her that it was alright, and that she had no reason to worry. As he looked towards Asya, he looked towards Rainier, he looked towards Irina and everyone else. He simply mouthed out the words, "I love you," as he felt the cold hand of Blackheart stab him through the back. His hand going all the way through his body, reaching out on the other side, as his blood-soaked black fist held his heart, crushing it as Issei's eyes glazed over, before Blackheart threw him to the ground in a pool of his own blood. Volley and the others had only just returned back to the Underworld, but they could sense Issei's life force draining. The barrier would become undone, and Blackheart would quickly retreat. as Nightmare and Lilith would arrive next to him. Blackheart untransformed back into his human state as he licked Issei's blood from his hands as he looked down upon him. Irina rushed over to his side along with everyone else. Asya desperately using Twilight Healing trying to rescue him. They looked to see if there were any Phoenix Tears available, but there were none left. Irina looked down to Issei as she held his hand, and he looked up to her.
Issei? Issei, come on. It's okay. You'll be alright. Don't worry, Asya's gonna heal you.
Irina. Rainier would also take Issei's other hand.
Issei, come on. Come on, you don't have to die here. Come on. You told me this isn't gonna be how it ends. Come on, damn it. You can't die like this.
Issei tried to speak. However, his throat would be clogged with his own blood. As he looked up towards everyone, Rias, she began shedding her own tears as well. Akeno couldn't stop hers from flowing. Even Koneko felt inconsolable as Kiba held her. Zenobia being filled with a strong emotion of loss and of pain. All of them desperately trying to fight for Issei to live. Eventually Lady Mephisto would arrive along with Danny Ketch. As they looked down and saw what had happened, even Lady Mephisto was left speechless, and Danny as well. Falling to his knees, as sadly the cycle had repeated itself once again. They thought that things could have been different. They thought that maybe Issei could have been the one. But like every other Ghost Rider, they always fell to Blackheart. For he was something that they simply could not overcome. As Issei's eyes glossed over, the life draining from them, his body going completely numb, Irina would cradle him as she yelled high into the sky above. It was the yell of pain and of sorrow. As Blackheart, Nightmare, and Lilith, and the remaining members of the Chaos Brigade would all disappear, a dark rain would fall upon the Underworld. This rain being the collective tears of all of those who fought that day. As the rain fell, as their screams, their cries, reaching from the Underworld high above even the heavens themselves. There was an immense pain that was felt through all of their hearts. For Issei Hyodo, the Ghost Rider, was now dead. This concludes What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? High School DxD Flame of Fury, Season 3, Part 3. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have on the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for next week as we are going to be concluding this series with Season 4 of What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? High School DxD Blazing Hero Season 4 Part 1 on Monday. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.